And that day, I walked out of that room knowing full well that I felt like I should have said something, but I didn't. I was too scared.
Welcome to Grief City.
Don't know how we ended up here. Blue sky, sunshine, it was all clear. I'm surrounded by all my worst fears. Yeah, it feels like a ghost
And
town.
remember, if this is your first visit, you are not alone.
Hey, and welcome to the Grief City podcast. I'm Nuella, and let's get into all the griefy things today. So, in today's episode, I wanted to talk about guilt, shame, and regret in your grief journey. I think anyone that has navigated any kind of loss has felt all of these things at some point. Some of us feel them very heavily, some of us maybe just a little bit. And, guilt and regret can look like I got in an argument with them the last time I talked to them, or I wasn't patient enough with them when they were here and alive. Like I just wasn't a good person to them. Or it could even be things like I feel so bad because I didn't say enough, I didn't do enough, or there's so many reasons as to why I think we can feel guilty and ashamed in our grief journey. Because so often we look at ourselves and think like, well, what could I have done better? Or like, what could I have done to save them? And maybe there are things, I don't know. But the reality is that most of the time, like we need to give ourselves a little grace because that guilt it just like eats you alive. It is all consuming. Guilt has been a really, really big aspect of my grief journey. I have wanted to talk about this for a long time. And every time I felt like I should start talking about it, I would get so scared and I would shrink back. And it just came from this place of, I am terrified what people are going to say. But the truth is that I have been so, mentally abusive to myself in my grief journey that nothing anyone else could say could be worse than what I have already told myself. So it's so stupid, but that's what it is. And I was so scared to talk about this. But enough is enough. It's time to start getting into all the details of guilt in loss and stories about that. And hopefully me sharing my story with you today can just give you a sense of relief and encouragement. Guilt has been a part of my grief journey, like right from day one. I still struggle with it today sometimes, but it is not nearly as suffocating as it was the first 8 months after my dad passed away. So my guilt stems from one particular event that had occurred. And when my dad was in the hospital, so I was up staying with my mom. And each day we would go in and we would visit him. We had 1 hour to visit him. And I know we were like very fortunate because that was not the case for almost anyone that had a loved one in the hospital that had a COVID diagnosis. So we had the opportunity to see him each day for an hour maximum. And every time you go in, you had to gown up. You had to like wear a face mask. Like I think no, it wasn't goggles. It was like a plastic face shield, like had to have gloves, all the stuff. It was a whole event going in to see him. So my mom would always go in first, spend however long she wanted to spend with him. And then if there was time left, I would go in after. So this particular day that we were going to visit him, my mom had received a phone call in the morning, and the doctors let her know that my dad's hemoglobin levels had dropped significantly in the night. And so that morning, they were doing a blood transfusion and also running some tests to see where internal bleeding had happened. So I think they ran like 2 tests. Um, I thought they were going to do more extensive testing, but they just like tested his urine or kidneys and I think maybe his stomach. And that was it. He didn't find any bleeding in any of those areas, but he was more stable after the transfusion. And I believe this was the day, this is like right after they either were running like a breathing test on him to see if he could start breathing on his own a bit, or it was like right after they had stopped the sedative. I can't remember which one, or maybe it was like both at the same time. So essentially, what was supposed to happen is after he was off the fentanyl, which was the sedative, he would begin to wake up and start, trying to breathe more on his own. So we went in that day. My mom went in for the visit, went to see him, and then it was my turn to go in. And each day that I would go in and see him, I would pray over him, I would sing, and just talk to him. Whew. And that particular day, as I was just praying over him, I remember God saying, pray over his brain. And I immediately was thinking like, oh, his mind, he must be anxious or something. Like, so I touched his head and I started praying over his head. And as I was doing that, I was feeling this gut feeling of, I need to tell the nurses. I need to tell the nurses that I think something's wrong with his head. If you've ever been in a very grave situation in a hospital with a loved one that's going through medical things, you may know that experience and you may know what it's like to deal with the medical staff. And, we had some staff members that were wonderful and they were so pleasant always. But it's very intimidating in a hospital environment. And especially during COVID stuff, it was very intimidating. It felt like there was so much discourse going on all the time. And speaking up to medical staff members just felt so scary and intimidating. And that day, I walked out of that room knowing full well that I felt like I should have said something, but I didn't. I was too scared. And I just chalked it up to, oh, the staff will take care of that. Like they're going to find what's going on if it's something wrong with his brain or with his head. And I didn't say a word. And, a week and a half goes by. He's still not waking up from the sedative. Like that tube in his throat, the ventilator, should have been really uncomfortable and should have aggravated him as he was starting to wake up. And the hospital staff kept telling us, oh, it takes up to 2 weeks. Later we find out that's actually not true. It should have been a matter of days or hours. But he was not waking up. And so nearly 2 weeks goes by, and the doctor on the floor that week, says to my mom, I think we need to let's run some other tests. Like, let's do a scan of his body or brain or whatever. So they ran the tests, I think EKG is the heart thing. Like, that was coming back okay. And then they took a brain scan. And my dad had suffered a massive bleed in his brain. And it was going to be what in the doctor's words, I should say, a 0% chance of him to be able to survive it. When I found that out, I told my husband what I felt like God told me. And in, charismatic, like Christian circles, it's believed that God speaks to us and speaks in visions and prophetic words. And in this case, what I would consider a word of knowledge, which is you hear something from God that you otherwise would never have been able to known about someone. And when when I felt like God told me to pray over his brain, that felt directly like a word of knowledge, because the issue and the bleed happened in his brain. Oh, and that does really damaging things to a person when you're like, oh my God, I did know what it was, and I didn't say a freaking word. That absolutely destroyed me. And I walked through this whole thing of like feeling like God teased me, or like I was being punished for this. Like, you didn't obey me, and now your dad's dead. It absolutely destroyed me every day. My whole life I've struggled with my own self-esteem issues, about body or personality or things like that. And dealt with self-hatred in different ways. But after that, I had never, ever dealt with so much self-hatred every day. And just feeling like you're the reason, you're the problem. Like, you should have spoken up. You should have said something. You were given this insight. Why didn't you do anything with it? It was debilitating. And every day of grief was so difficult and just so dark and so hard. Because, like I said, grief is already really difficult each day. But then you layer on guilt and shame and all this self-hatred for yourself for something that happened, and you feeling like you could have helped it from happening. It just destroys you. And it makes living so difficult. Makes it so difficult every day. When I lost my dad, every single day I felt unmotivated and stuck. Sing text helped me gently move forward, and it gave me a small sense of purpose each day. Singing has always been therapeutic for me, but after loss, it became essential for my mental well being. Getting a daily text with my guided vocal training reminded me to take 15 minutes to do something good for myself. Singtex is my company, and it's also what makes this podcast possible. If you love singing and you want support for your voice and you want that creative outlet in your grief, Singtext is here for you. Try it with a 14-day pass for $5 at singtextofficial.com. See how your voice feels and see how singing can support your healing. In hindsight, I now know that when a brain bleed happens, those brain cells are damaged, usually within minutes, and there's no way to repair them. But even knowing that, there's still always just this feeling of like, yeah, but what if? But what if I said something 2 weeks earlier before he died? Like within a matter of hours after the bleed probably happened. And I'll never know if it would have made a difference, and it probably wouldn't have. And I still I still have moments to this day where I'm like, God, why on earth did you tell me that if it really wouldn't have changed anything? Why would you tell me that? And obviously there's so many reasons you could fill that with and say, oh, maybe it's because he was in pain or he was uncomfortable or whatever. But it never really took away the weight of that guilt and that shame. So I was struggling with this debilitating self-hatred every single day for 8 months. I stopped going to church. I did not want anything to do with my faith at that moment. I did not have any trust in God after that. I really became a recluse, and it was so hard for me to be in any kind of social situations. And it was like that thing of you wake up and I was never suicidal in my grief, but it's just that feeling of like, if I died today, that would probably be better. I'd be okay with that. I would have never attempted to take my life, but it's just that feeling of you just feel like such a piece of crap that you're like, I contribute nothing to society. It's probably better off I'm not here, which is so horrible. Makes you feel like garbage, absolute garbage. And I remembered I would have my why God moments several times. While I didn't really want relationship with him, God had been such an integral part of my life for so many years. My faith has always been a big part of my life. And so I would have those why God moments and, getting my anger out, my frustrations, and then turning into woe is me, I'm a terrible person, all that. It was a whole cycle. But I remember this particular day that I was having one of those why God moments. And I felt like God said to me, your dad wanted this. I was like, what? Why would he want this? He loved his family. He loved being with us. And you can call me crazy. I may have just made stuff up to make myself feel better and to finally move on from like this debilitating grief every day and this horrible feeling of guilt every single day. But I felt like God said, your dad wanted this because when he saw me, he just wanted to be with me. And I swear to you, that is the only thing to this day that I think has helped me heal from the guilt I carried for so long. Because even to know the science of like, oh, it probably damaged his brain cells instantly, and there was no coming back from that unless literally this miraculous intervention happened. Even knowing all that, I still would blame myself every day for the reason that my dad wasn't here. And when I felt like God told me that in that moment, it was like, oh my gosh, there was a weight off my shoulders. There's finally some relief. Because so many days it felt like the guilt would just take me out. But for the first time in months to like feel some of that weight lift was the most refreshing thing ever. While I was in the heaps of guilt and feeling that weight every day, I was writing a lot of songs and writing a lot of this grief, putting it into music. And there was one particular song that I wrote that was just all about the weight of the grief. And I remember when I showed my husband like the draft of the song I'd come up with the one day, I realized like this song was pretty dramatic and kind of dark. And I'm like, I like kind of downplayed it, like, oh yeah, it's about like the guilt that so many people feel in grief. And, truly, like these words were just like my heart's cry and just feeling like a piece of garbage. Like I was the one to blame for everything. So I wrote this song called My Worst Mistake. I remember the day so vividly. It was like a snowy day here in Tennessee, and I was just looking out the window writing it. It was just like the perfect dramatic setting and sad kind of setting. And it was the first I really like was voicing, like putting a voice to this guilt and shame that I was feeling. And in the song, I reference myself as a sinner. And every pre-chorus, it comes to this part where it like references back to like all the sinners I know, just talking about grievers that deal with guilt in general. But the very last pre-chorus where I say this, start the line with all the sinners I know, it ends with all the sinners I know, find love again. And it was just always that part of me still trying so deeply to hold on to like, maybe there's going to be hope. Maybe I'm going to dig myself out of this hole. Because when you're in that guilt and that grief, each day, it just feels like a hole you literally cannot get out of. It is so exhausting, and it's so hard on your body, on your mind, and on your heart. But yeah, I wrote this song just to make, I guess, my guilt feel seen, and I hope it can do the same for others. And no one or nothing can force you out of your guilt that you feel. It's like one of those things that I wish I could any griever that I talk to that struggles with this, like I wish I could lift that weight and that burden for them, but I can't do it. And it's something that you as an individual just has to come to, and you have to release it and you have to let go of it. But I hope my story can encourage you that you're not alone in those kinds of feelings. You're not alone in feeling really guilty and struggling with that. And so many other people have, their own stories that are so unique to them of these struggles of regret and guilt and shame that they have about the loss of their loved one. And how you begin to find healing will probably be totally different than how I started to find healing. But I do know this is that you deserve to find happiness again, and you deserve to heal your heart, and you deserve to experience joy again. Because there was just once I felt like God spoke that to me, like I got that answer to my why God kind of moment. I realized and had the epiphany, like feeling so guilty and hating myself so much will never bring him back. It will never bring him back. And why would I make myself feel so horrible when grief is already just hard enough on my heart? Why would I add that extra layer of just abusing myself? And it was just like in that moment, I realized like I deserve to feel joy again. I've done this long enough now. Like I need to let this go and I need to heal. And it didn't happen instantly, but healing started happening. And I still have my days where I am taken back to that moment where I heard God tell me pray over his brain, and I just feel like I'm reliving it all again. And I'm struggling with guilt and shame again. But it doesn't last as long. Like that feeling and that weight of it just doesn't crush me all day long like it used to. No amount of guilt can change what happened. And just living in that guilt all the time, it just makes you feel horrible. And you deserve to feel peace and joy again. If this story resonates with you, I think you're going to really like my new track, My Worst Mistake, where this song is just all about exploring the difficulties of feeling guilt and grief each day, but also holding on for the hope that like this will come to an end. I think this can come to an end. Go check it out on whatever platform you stream on. But I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you feel encouraged by this story. And I hope it just gives you a moment to realize like, hey, I don't have to carry this weight of guilt so heavy anymore. I deserve to heal. We'll talk soon.